Jealousy doesn't always destroy the one it's aimed at. Sometimes it circles back and burns the one who threw it. Now imagine this for a moment. Chosen One, someone builds a weapon in secret. They sharpen it with hatred. They aim it at you with a smile. But the moment they release it, something strange happens. That weapon spins in the air like a boomerang, and it lands not in your back, but in the chest of the one they love most, their prized possession, their golden child, the one they swore they were protecting while secretly fueling their own bitterness. That's when they finally stop. Not because they've grown a conscience, but because the universe just made them feel the cost of messing with your energy. And when it hits home, that's when they pause. Here's the truth they never expected. Every chosen one walks with a mirror around their aura. Whatever they throw at you returns to sender. But what they didn't know was this: that mirror, it's tilted. So the darkness they sent you didn't just bounce back at them, it ricocheted sideways and hit the person they'd least expect, their golden child. According to energy researchers and even some forms of quantum theory, emotional energy, especially hatred, carries a frequency. And when that frequency is intentionally aimed at someone who is spiritually protected, it doesn't disappear. It simply reroutes. That's not superstition, that's energy physics. So when their golden child starts falling sick, losing things, spiraling mentally, or suddenly getting into fights with them, it's not random, it's not bad luck. It's the echo of their own bitterness finding a softer, more innocent target in their vicinity. And suddenly they're panicking. Suddenly they want to stop. Not because they regret, but because the price got too personal. And thank you, Chosen One, for even being here. Don't forget to pay this message back by simply pressing the like and subscribe button to help spread this message to more souls. Because it's the responsibility of all of us to spread the light. And thank you, Chosen One, for being a part of this mission. You are part of a force far bigger than what this world sees. You are not alone in this, and you're not crazy for seeing what others try to ignore. Now let's come back to what's really happening here. Because this video isn't about revenge. It's not even about pain. It's about the strange mercy the universe shows you when it lets your enemies expose themselves through their own consequences. You didn't wish for anyone to suffer. You simply protected your peace. You let go. You walked away. But instead of leaving you alone, they kept sending shade, gossip, energy attacks, silent warfare. And the universe? It watched. It waited. And then it made a move they never expected. It taught them a lesson using the one person they thought would never feel the blowback. That's the twist no one talks about. Sometimes the golden child, the one they place on a pedestal, the one they brag about, the one they use to make you feel small, becomes the exact mirror the universe chooses to reflect their toxicity, not because that child deserved it, but because it's the only way their heart could be touched. You see, narcissists don't feel pain unless it hits them through someone they're obsessed with. And when their favorite starts suffering, that's when they finally look in the mirror. This is why they're suddenly quiet now, why they've backed off, why they stopped poking you. It's not because they grew, it's not because they had a change of heart, it's because they saw a reflection of their own darkness showing up in someone they love, and it scared them. And Chosen One, this is the part they'll never admit. They saw the signs. The timing lined up too perfectly. Every time they tried to mess with you, something around them collapsed. They noticed, but they stayed in denial until it touched their favorite. That's when the illusion broke. That's when they understood. You are not the one to play with. So if you've been wondering why they went quiet, why they're suddenly acting neutral, why their golden child isn't glowing like they used to, this is why. The universe didn't punish them. It educated them, and it used their most prized mirror to do it. And now they'll stop, because for the first time they realized something scary. When you mess with protected energy, you don't just lose the battle, you end up hurting the people you thought you were shielding, and that's a cost even their ego can't afford. So, are you starting to feel it, chosen one? That inner knowing that this message found you for a reason. If it's hitting different today, it's because this is your confirmation that what they sent to hurt you is now circling back and shaking their world through the one they love most. Drop the number 777 in the comments if you've ever felt their energy shift right after you detached. And if you feel called, bless the mission behind this message, whether it's through a like, a comment, or even a small gift, because it keeps this truth alive and reaching more souls like yours. Every single energy exchange counts. And now, let's dive into it, step by step. And believe me, if you're a real chosen one, you won't just listen, you'll feel the truth vibrating through every word. Stay close. The deeper we go, the clearer it becomes. Let's get into it. Number 1. They thought you were stupid. You just let their ego kill them first. Sometimes the smartest revenge is silence. Let a fool talk long enough, and they'll dig their own grave, with applause still ringing in their ears. Oh, chosen one, the audacity, the sheer arrogance they wore like perfume, walking into every room like they were untouchable just because you didn't say a word. They mistook your peace for permission. They thought your silence meant surrender, but what they didn't know was you were watching the whole time, quietly calculating how deep their fall would be once their ego drove them off the cliff they built with their own lies. Now imagine this for a second, a lion pretending to sleep while the hyenas start dancing, thinking they own the jungle. That's what you did. You let them celebrate too early. You let them throw their little parade. You didn't argue. You didn't explain. You didn't defend yourself. Why? Because you knew something they didn't. Ego always writes checks that consequences eventually cash. They thought they had you figured out, thought they were smarter, faster, more cunning. They grinned when they thought you looked weak. But your silence, it was strategy. Your pause, precision. You were giving them enough rope, not because you wanted them to hang, but because you knew they would. That's what happens when people run on ego instead of awareness. They get sloppy, loud, predictable. You didn't lose control. You surrendered the illusion of needing to win in their game. While they were trying to impress the crowd, you were studying the script behind the curtain. You saw how badly they needed attention, how much they craved power, how desperate they were to be seen as the smartest person in the room. And so you made the one move their pride couldn't handle. You stepped back. You let them expose themselves. See, chosen one, there's a special kind of intelligence in restraint, and you mastered it. You didn't clap back because you knew karma would. You didn't fight fire with fire. You let the flames reveal who was really burning. And now, look at them, spinning, scrambling, questioning everything. They can't figure out how someone they looked down on ended up above them. But the truth is simple. You were never beneath them. You just let them believe it because their ego needed a stage to collapse on. And let's be real, they made it easy. Their need to feel superior blinded them. They couldn't even recognize your silence as power. They couldn't see the discipline it takes to say nothing, even when everything in you knows you're right. They kept poking, kept bragging, kept trying to bait you, thinking you'd snap, thinking you'd expose yourself. But you didn't. You were never playing checkers. You were playing chess, long game, deep strategy. And now the board is flipped and they're choking on every smug word they once threw in your direction. Some of them even started to believe they made you, that without their attention, their approval, their clout, you'd be nothing. Isn't that wild? They looked at you and saw someone they could shape, control, or silence. But the moment you stopped responding, the moment you stopped entertaining their nonsense, that's when their control started to crack. That's when they realized your power never came from their validation. It came from what they couldn't see, your alignment, your insight, your patience. And that patience, oh, it scared them, because nothing terrifies an insecure ego more than someone who doesn't need to react. They thought they were hurting you, but you were healing in silence. They thought you were breaking, but you were building. They thought you were lost, but you were aligning with something bigger than all their drama combined. And now, everything they did in the dark is starting to backfire in broad daylight. You didn't lift a finger, you didn't throw dirt, you just sat back and let the universe do what it does best, balance the scales. And now they're angry, not at what you did, but at how little they could do to stop the truth from rising. They're angry that their schemes didn't stick, that the lies didn't last, that their manipulation hit a wall, and that wall was your silence, your discipline, your refusal to play small just to make them feel big. Here's the part that'll always haunt them. You gave them a chance. You gave them room to correct, to realign, to treat you right. But they used that grace period as a window to compete with you, to sabotage you, to speak on your name when you weren't in the room. And now they're shocked that you're still standing, stronger, sharper, untouchable. They thought they could bury you in assumption, but they didn't realize you were the seed. So, chosen one, hear me clearly. What you did wasn't weakness. It was warfare, psychological, spiritual, strategic. You let them talk. You let them build false confidence. And then the universe did what you never had to. It showed everyone who was really operating on a higher frequency. The truth came out not because you screamed, but because you stood still. And now they're left with the bitter taste of their own pride. The golden child is falling apart. The mask is slipping. Their circle is watching. And everything they tried to pin on you is echoing in their own life. You didn't have to say a word. Your silence screamed louder than their gossip ever could. Let this be a reminder. The ones who underestimate you always end up exposed by the same trap they thought they set for you. You didn't play dumb. You just let their ego finish them first. And now they'll think twice before calling your stillness weakness ever again. Number 2. You never hid your power. You just wore it like camouflage. A wise mind never shows all its cards. It watches, listens, and lets the loud ones destroy themselves. Let's be clear about one thing. Chosen one, you were never slow, never confused, never naive. You were calculating. You were silent because you knew silence disarms the arrogant. You were calm because you knew chaos reveals the weak. You were humble not to shrink, but to observe. They mistook your quiet energy as ignorance, and that mistake, that was the beginning of their end. Now imagine this. A wolf walks into a camp dressed as a lamb. The others don't see the fangs beneath the smile. They don't hear the thoughts behind the silence. They just see harmless, and so they let their guard down. They speak too freely, plot too openly, boast too loudly, not knowing they're giving away the blueprint to someone who already decoded the game. That's you, chosen one. You didn't just survive manipulation. You studied it like a scientist under a microscope. You knew what to look for. You spotted the tells, and you never blinked. You didn't need to scream to be smart. You turned your intelligence into camouflage. While they flexed loudly, you moved like smoke, undetectable, untouchable, until it was too late. Power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it enters the room silently and leaves the loudest impact. That's what you were, a silent storm, a walking library that didn't need to open its pages to prove worth. You knew they fed off visible power, so you gave them the illusion they craved. You let them win small battles while you were planning the final blow. Not through revenge, but through precision, through alignment. They assumed you were harmless because you didn't fight back in public. They saw you smile when you could have snapped, nod when you could have spoken, walk away when you could have exposed. But what they didn't realize is that restraint, that was your sharpest weapon. You knew something they didn't. Loud liars always show their hand. All you had to do was wait. They played chess with their mouths. You played it with your mind. You weren't reacting, you were recording, mapping every move, memorizing every inconsistency, marking every moment they underestimated you. And they handed it all to you for free. Every time they assumed you weren't paying attention, you were archiving. Every time they tried to one-up you, you were gathering receipts. And now they're wondering why you still stand, how you knew everything before it happened. But you did, because you weren't distracted by the noise. You were locked in on the patterns. Here's a fact most manipulators never consider. The quieter someone is, the more dangerous their memory becomes. And you, chosen one, have the memory of a battlefield general. You don't just remember what was said. You remember how it was said, why it was said, what was happening in the background, and how that one moment connects to 50 others. You don't forget. You just don't speak until it's time. Imagine this, a hawk flying high, circling, quiet, steady, while the rats scurry below thinking they're safe just because the bird didn't swoop. But when the time comes, one clean dive, no warning. That's you. That's what they feared. Not your words, but your watchfulness. Not your presence, but your patience. They don't understand how you could keep calm in the face of their chaos. It messes with their mind. You didn't argue, yet you won. You didn't expose, yet their lies fell apart. You didn't defend yourself, yet truth kept crawling out of the cracks. That's not luck. That's not coincidence. That's power, moving in silence. Never underestimate a person who chooses not to speak, especially when they have every reason to, because those are the ones building something far bigger than an argument. They're building empires of understanding. And when the dust settles, they don't just walk away, they walk through the ruins with receipts and a clean conscience. They thought you were too quiet, but the truth? You were just too smart to speak too soon. Now they sit there, confused. How did the person we thought we outsmarted end up holding the truth in their hands? They're scrambling for explanations. They're rewriting their story. They're even blaming others. But deep down, they know. They know they walked into a trap they built for you, not realizing you were documenting every corner of it. They can't unsee your strength now. They can't pretend your stillness was weakness, because everything they once laughed at now haunts them. Your patience, your silence, your refusal to react. It's all echoing in their mind like thunder, because now they realize you weren't invisible. You were watching, you weren't silent, you were sharpening, and every time they thought they had you, they were really handing you another piece of evidence. They showed off their so-called brilliance while you were storing up yours like ammunition. They played with power while you studied its patterns, and now that it's all falling apart, you remain untouched, not because you hid, but because you prepared. You were 10 steps ahead before they even realized they were in a game. And Chosen One, if you're wondering why this resonates so deep, it's because you've always been underestimated. You've always been the one they didn't see coming. And that's your gift. You carry truth like a sword. You only unsheathe when absolutely necessary. You protect your energy like a vault. You let fools celebrate while you track the storm building behind their smiles. You are not weak. You are wired differently. You are built for spiritual warfare that requires intelligence, not noise. So let them keep guessing. Let them keep rewriting. Let them keep asking, how did we not see this coming? Because you already knew. You saw it all. You mapped it all. You built your silence like a fortress and let them walk in blind. And now, they finally realize you weren't hiding from them. You were hiding yourself for the perfect moment to rise.
Dansai, naos, maus, naum.
Number 3. You let them throw shade and turned it into a mirror that blinded them. They didn't break you with their insults. They revealed themselves trying to destroy you. Oh, Chosen One, they thought they had you pegged. They labeled you weak, emotional, soft, and you didn't fight it. You let them. Not because it was true, but because you saw what they were really doing. You knew from the very beginning. Projection is confession. Every jab they threw wasn't really about you. It was a desperate cry to hide from themselves. And you just stood there, still and silent, while they kept handing you their mask, one insult at a time. Imagine this. Someone throws mud at a mirror, thinking they're dirtying you. But the harder they throw, the clearer their reflection becomes. That's what happened. They called you naive, and you let them, because you saw that they were terrified of being exposed as unprepared. They said you were too sensitive because they couldn't handle their own emotional storms. Every insult was a breadcrumb leading straight to the parts of themselves they were too ashamed to face. And you tracked every step. They thought your silence meant defeat, but it was preparation. You weren't shrinking, you were adapting. You studied their tone, their tells, their insecurities. You learned how to make them comfortable in their delusion while you kept sharpening your awareness. You didn't defend yourself. You didn't try to correct their perception. Why? Because you knew the more you let them talk, the more they told on themselves. You weren't the character they created in their heads. That version of you, weak, passive, forgettable, that was their fantasy, and you let them live in it. Because while they were building illusions, you were building leverage. Real power doesn't panic when misjudged. It waits. Now they're confused, agitated, even paranoid. Why? Because their own projections have started crumbling around them. The lies they told about you no longer match your reality, and now they're left explaining why the one they called nothing is still rising while they're stuck in the same emotional pit they tried to drag you into. You didn't fight their words, you mirrored them, and the reflection, it exposed everything they tried to bury. That's why they can't look you in the eyes anymore. You didn't just survive them, you made them face themselves. And that's a battle they were never ready for. Number 4. You weren't powerless, you were just letting their clock run out. Sometimes silence isn't surrender, it's just you watching the enemy waste all their ammunition. Oh, Chosen One, Let them think you were weak. Let them believe you were cornered. That was the setup. That was the brilliance. While they were busy launching emotional grenades, you were behind the scenes, not just surviving, timing. Because you knew something they didn't. Power without timing is just noise. But timing without warning? That's a weapon they never see coming. Imagine this. A snake coils itself, not because it's scared, but because it knows the strike has to be precise. That's what you were doing. Coiling, watching, waiting. Not out of fear, but calculation. You weren't going to waste energy trying to convince people of your truth. You were saving it for the exact moment when truth would break the room without you even having to raise your voice. They were erratic, driven by ego, lashing out like toddlers throwing tantrums in glass houses. And you didn't even flinch. Why? Because you were never trying to win their approval. You were built for bigger battles, and you understood timing is the battlefield. That's what made you dangerous. You weren't emotional, you were surgical. Fools rush in, but masters, they wait. They thought you were hesitating, that you had nothing to say. But what they couldn't grasp is that your pause was power. You weren't trying to win small arguments. You were waiting to flip the whole board. While they were burning bridges with gasoline and gossip, you were watching which ones you'd never have to cross again. And let's answer the question burning in their minds right now. How did you stay so calm when we were doing the most? The answer is simple, because the universe was revealing, not removing. Because their downfall was never your doing. It was their own timeline catching up. And your silence, it wasn't approval, it was alignment. You gave them rope, not to forgive, not to forget, but to let them hang their own lies out to dry. And now the clock has struck. The chaos they once launched like fireworks has returned like an avalanche. You didn't stop them, you just didn't chase them. And that's what burned. So now they sit in the ashes of their own impulsive war, shocked that the one they thought was powerless was simply waiting for the moment when the truth would roar without effort. You didn't fight back. You let the timing speak for you. And when your moment came, you didn't shout. You moved. And everything they built against you collapsed in silence. Number 5. You didn't need the spotlight. You were busy building in the shadows. They craved applause. You craved freedom. That's why you won, and they're still performing. Oh, chosen one. From the very start, you knew this wasn't about recognition. It was about positioning. While they were flashing lights in every direction, trying to get noticed, trying to feel important, you were disappearing. Not because you were lost, but because you understood something deeper. Real power doesn't need an audience. It needs access. Imagine this. A thief walks into a room screaming for attention, drawing every eye to his antics. But behind him, silent and unnoticed, a master strategist is unlocking every door he thought was sealed. That was you. While they entertained the crowd, you were slipping through hidden entrances. They wanted followers. You wanted leverage. They took the bait, thinking if you weren't loud, you weren't significant. But the truth is, you never played to be seen. You played to shift the entire board. Your goal was never domination. It was transformation. You didn't need to lead the parade. You just needed to walk past them when the dust cleared. You don't outshine a manipulator. You outlast them, quietly, strategically. They thought they were above you, and you let them believe that, not out of weakness, but because you understood one powerful truth: the higher their pedestal, the harder the fall. You weren't reacting, you were embedding yourself, learning their psychology, gathering every clue they were too arrogant to hide. You made your silence look like submission so their egos would do the rest. They called you dependent, fragile, forgettable, and you nodded, because every label they threw at you bought you more time, more room, more intel. While they built castles with glass windows, you dug tunnels beneath their foundations. While they chased attention, you studied alignment. They missed what you were really doing, forming unshakable clarity, building relationships they couldn't see, reading the silent cues no one else noticed. They were obsessed with optics. You were obsessed with impact. And when the day came to rise, you didn't need to scream. Your presence did the talking. Now they look confused, bitter. How did you end up with everything we thought belonged to us? And the answer will forever haunt them, because while they performed, you planned. While they flexed, you fortified. You let them misjudge you, and that misjudgment became your shield. You didn't disguise yourself to hide, you disguised yourself to win. And now, without ever needing the spotlight, you're the one they can't stop watching. Number 6. You let them set the trap, then built a new game around it. They gave you the blueprint, trying to break you. Now they're stuck in a system you rewired. Oh, chosen one. They thought they were smart, thought they had you cornered. They built traps and waited for you to fall, not realizing you were never panicking. You were studying. Every lie, every setup, every sideways glance when things got tense. You logged it. You dissected it. You didn't flinch. You observed. And while they were busy plotting your downfall, they unknowingly handed you the key to rewrite the whole game. Imagine this. A spider builds a web, confident the fly will panic and get tangled. But this time, the fly doesn't struggle. It studies. It watches the spider's patterns, the weak spots in the web, the places where the threads are worn thin. And when the time is right, the fly doesn't escape. It dismantles the web and builds something stronger in its place. That's you. You didn't escape the trap. You outgrew it. You redefined the environment. They thought they were pressuring you, but they were just revealing how far they'd go, how small they think, how desperate they truly are when things don't go their way. You didn't just learn their tactics. You memorized the structure behind their entire operation. You saw who they trusted, who betrayed, who watched in silence, thinking they were innocent, and all of it became your fuel. True warriors don't just survive attacks, they study the enemy's blade and forge their own. While they played dirty, you stayed clean. Not because you couldn't fight back, but because you were building something bigger. You weren't after petty revenge, you were after control. You didn't want to beat them in their game. You wanted to change the rules of the field. They don't know how it happened. One day, their tricks worked. The next, nothing landed. Their manipulation fell flat. Their mind games bounced back. Their influence collapsed. Why? Because you rewired the system they tried to trap you in. You took the data. You built defense. You upgraded your presence. And now, they're still trying to play you with old strategies in a new world you designed. The game changed, and they're no longer the ones holding the cards, because you weren't trying to win their war. You were building your own kingdom.
Maisacho.
Number 7. They laughed while you listened. Now you're moving while they're stuck. They mocked your silence because they couldn't hear what you were mastering. Oh, chosen one. They had jokes, didn't they? Every time you moved with intention, they snickered like they had it all figured out. Your stillness, they called it weakness. Your quiet, they labeled it fear. They mistook your composure for cluelessness. And that mistake will haunt them, because while they were performing for the crowd, you were performing an autopsy on their ego. You weren't trying to prove a point. You were scanning their moves like radar, every little shift in tone, every fake laugh, every sideways glance. You weren't just in the room, you were absorbing the psychology of it all. You didn't need to react because you were collecting intel, watching who they bowed to, who they belittled, what made them flinch, and most importantly, what they couldn't stop talking about, because that's where their insecurities were bleeding through the armor. Imagine this. A hunter walks through the forest, mocking the silence of the trees, never realizing the silence is what keeps the predator hidden. They didn't see you crouched in the grass, clocking their footsteps, memorizing the rhythm of their arrogance. And when you finally moved, it was surgical, sharp, precise. They never saw it coming, not because you were hiding, but because they weren't paying attention. You don't need to make noise to shift power. You just need to know where the pressure point is and wait. They thought mocking you gave them power, but really it gave you access. The more they tried to play you, the more they revealed their hand. They were performing, you were programming. They handed you every vulnerability dressed as a joke. And you caught it, quietly, fully, strategically. By the time you made your move, they were too comfortable, too sloppy, too convinced of your irrelevance. And that's when the shift happened, not with drama, not with vengeance, but with clarity, precision, mastery. You rearranged the atmosphere by doing nothing extra, just applying what they freely exposed. And now, the very people who mocked you are forced to ask, how did they flip this? But the answer is simple. They were laughing. You were learning. And now, the joke's on them. Nasutati, Nasarai, Nasansai, Nasarasi, Masi, Dai, Masinsain, Masu. Number 8. They underestimated you because real power never begs to be seen. They weren't ready for your silence to be the loudest strategy in the room. O chosen one, arrogance is always loudest when it feels safest. That's why they never saw you coming. They were so sure of themselves, so caught up in the illusion of dominance that they didn't bother to study you. To them, you were quiet, soft-spoken, unbothered, which they translated as weak. But what they failed to realize is this. Real power never shows up wearing ego. It moves through awareness, and that's what they couldn't recognize because they've never had it. They were busy sizing you up based on volume, assuming that the loudest voice in the room must be the strongest. But you weren't looking to win the crowd. You were listening to the frequency. You were locked in, not on attention, but on alignment. You weren't competing, you were observing, and that's why they missed you. Because arrogance always looks for reflection, not depth. You had depth, you had discipline, you had authenticity, and their pride couldn't compute that. Imagine this. A shadow walks into the room while everyone's chasing the spotlight. The crowd ignores it. But later they realize that shadow was moving the light. That was you. While they were performing, you were positioning. They were hoping for applause. You were watching the floor beneath their feet crack with every overstep. You didn't flinch when they dismissed you. You didn't panic when they ignored you. Because you knew their comfort around you was the trap they built for themselves. They expected fireworks. You gave them silence. They pushed, hoping for a meltdown. You gave them stillness. And the truth is, that rattled them more than any clapback ever could. You held space for your truth without trying to prove it. You didn't shrink. You didn't explode. You let them exhaust themselves while you stayed rooted, and that shook them to their core. Arrogance is blind, but authenticity is surgical. It doesn't rush. It strikes when the moment is irrefutable. And when that moment came, you didn't have to say a word. You shifted the entire outcome by simply staying true while they performed for a version of reality that no longer worked. Now they sit in silence, stunned, bitter, exposed, because the one they laughed at just rewrote the ending they swore they controlled. You didn't just win, Chosen One. You erased their illusion without ever needing the spotlight. Number 9. They tried to break you and handed you their blueprint instead. They thought they were hurting you, but they were handing you their playbook, page by page. Chosen One, they thought the damage they were doing was permanent. They thought the lies, the gossip, the subtle jabs would wear you down. What they didn't realize was every hit they threw was teaching you how they fight. Every setup was a signal. Every attack was intel. You weren't breaking down. You were downloading data. You weren't reacting, you were recording, silently, strategically. You watched how they twisted truth with charm, how they wore fake smiles while stabbing from behind closed doors. You saw how they used others like chess pieces, how they crumbled any time they weren't in control of the narrative. You didn't walk into this blindly. You let them write their own confession in real time, and you read every word. Imagine this. A boxer steps into the ring thinking they've already won. They throw punch after punch while their opponent just weaves and watches, never striking. The crowd thinks that opponent is losing until the last round, when that same quiet fighter lands one final blow with surgical precision. That's you. You weren't losing. You were learning. They celebrated too early. They got arrogant, mistaking your silence for surrender. But you were watching, taking notes. You saw who they whispered with. You saw who repeated the lies without hesitation. You learned how they hide weakness behind aggression. And you filed it all away. Every tactic, every fake apology, every gaslight. You didn't just survive the fire. You learned who lit it, how they poured the fuel, and where they planned to hide the ashes. And now, they don't know what to do with you. Their games don't work. Their triggers don't land. Their traps collapse before they're even set, because you dismantled their strategy from the inside out. And not only did you evolve, you made them obsolete. You didn't clap back. You cut the strings. You didn't get revenge. You rewired the whole system. Now they're left with their own tactics, exposed, powerless, predictable, because the one they tried to destroy was quietly becoming indestructible. Number 10. They rushed the lies, but you let the truth walk in with perfect timing. They wrote your downfall in gossip. You rewrote your legacy in silence. Oh, Chosen One, they thought speed would win. They thought if they said it loud enough, fast enough, and often enough, it would become the truth. They twisted the story, dragged your name, built false narratives like castles made of sand. And the people, they watched, they whispered, some even believed it, but you didn't flinch. Because you knew something they didn't. Lies age fast, but truth ages undefeated. You didn't match their chaos. You didn't step onto their stage. You let them perform while you built. Let them spin their fiction while you stepped deeper into alignment. Imagine this. A sprinter takes off with everything they've got, burning out quick, looking back to mock the marathon runner they think is behind. But by the time their legs give out, the one they mocked is gliding past with breath in reserve and eyes locked on the finish. That's you. You knew what they didn't. Real power doesn't need to speak over lies. It simply outlasts them. You didn't waste your energy correcting people who were committed to misunderstanding you. Why? Because when the dust settles, history remembers who finished, not who shouted first. They told everyone who you were, and you let them. You watched them bask in that borrowed attention, thinking their version of the story would stand forever. But it couldn't, because they built it on bitterness, not truth. And here's the irony. While they obsessed over destroying your name, you were building something they could never touch. Evidence, progress, peace, growth. You were moving in silence, stacking blessings, aligning with purpose. You weren't trying to be proven right. You were becoming undeniable. The ultimate flex is not arguing with the lie. It's becoming so elevated, the lie looks ridiculous in hindsight. And now, look around. The same mouths that mocked you have gone quiet. The same eyes that rolled now follow you in confusion. Because the truth didn't need to yell. It just needed time. And time is undefeated. You didn't win by fighting. You won by lasting. And the version of you they tried to erase just became the only version anyone remembers. Number 11. You didn't clap back. You leveled up so high they can't breathe your air. They came to trigger you. You chose transcendence. Now they're choking on your distance. Oh, chosen one, they tried everything to pull you into the pit with them, provoked you, mocked you, spread lies just to get a rise. They wanted a scene. They wanted a reaction. But what did you give them? Nothing. You didn't scream. You didn't clap back. You ascended. They couldn't understand it. Why didn't you defend yourself? Why didn't you retaliate? Because you knew something they didn't. Retaliation is recycled pain. It feeds the cycle. But elevation? That's how you end it. You didn't step down to fight in the mud. You built stairs out of every stone they threw. You weren't scared. You were focused. Imagine this. Someone throws dirt, hoping you'll stop and throw it back. But instead, you plant a seed in it. And months later, they come looking for war, only to find a garden. That's what you did. You turned their hate into harvest. You didn't rise to get even. You rose to get free. They're still talking, still trying, still hoping the old you will reappear. But you've shifted. You no longer live at that frequency. You outgrew the narrative and the need to correct it. Your peace is louder than their noise ever was. They don't understand how someone who was so quiet, so soft, so passive, became untouchable. But here's the truth. While they were calculating their next insult, you were recalibrating your entire life. While they were trying to block your blessings, you were aligning with something they can't access, clarity. And now they're stuck, still cycling through bitterness while you're breathing rare air, elevated, healed, and unreachable. That's why they can't touch you. That's why they obsess. Because you didn't fall for the trap. You rose above it. You didn't choose revenge. You chose range. And now, they're stuck in the same storm they tried to throw at you, watching you fly in skies they'll never reach. Number 12. You became what they feared without ever becoming what they were. They tried to turn you into them. You chose to become something they'll never touch. Oh, chosen one, they said you wouldn't make it, that you were too soft, too kind, too quiet. They swore you'd fold, swore you'd fall. But here you are, standing in your truth, rising in your silence, walking in a power that doesn't scream, it radiates. And the best part, you didn't have to become cruel to do it. You didn't lose yourself, you found yourself. They expected you to break and come back bitter. They wanted you hardened, cold, unrecognizable, because that's what happened to them. They got hurt and stayed there. But you took your pain and alchemized it. You didn't rot. You rose. You didn't mimic their manipulation. You mastered your alignment. And that's what they never saw coming. Imagine this: someone builds a prison and throws you in it, expecting you to rot. But instead, you start planting seeds in the cracks, and before they know it, your garden is climbing the walls, breaking the bars, flooding the room with color. You didn't just escape, you transformed the very place they sent to destroy you. You didn't evolve with vengeance, you evolved with integrity, and that's the sharpest blade of all. You didn't scream, "Look at me now." You didn't have to. Your glow did the talking, your growth made the statement. And the silence, that silence, it haunts them. Because they can't figure out how someone they wrote off became the very thing they swore was impossible. You became healed, whole, respected, and still you. That's what stings them the most. Not that you rose, but that you didn't have to become like them to do it. You didn't steal, manipulate, slander, or control. You didn't use people. You used wisdom. You used patience. You used the very pain they caused to carve your throne. And now they sit on the sidelines, watching, whispering, wishing, trying to figure out how the one they tried to erase became the blueprint they can't copy. But they never will, because you didn't become powerful by pretending. You became powerful by remembering who you are. You didn't just win, you won without ever lowering your standard. And that, chosen one, is the victory they'll never stop watching. And so, chosen one, let this be your final reminder. You didn't just survive what they sent, you transcended it. You mastered their tactics without ever becoming their reflection. While they were busy plotting your downfall, you were building your rise. And now, they're stuck in the story they wrote for you, while you're living in a reality they never saw coming. That's the real revenge: peace, power, and purpose. If this message hit your spirit, drop 777 in the comments to confirm your evolution. Like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs the reminder. Keep rising, keep shining.